We are about to get started. I will introduce, sorry, some people will have backs to, so apologies for that. We're about to get started. I will ask our panelists to join me on the stage. This is post-lunch, so we're going to make it as controversial and fun as possible. This is a, do not sleep in this room. And I love this setup because this is really like, fly-on-the-wall conversations. So please welcome. What I'll do is I'll give every panelist a minute to just introduce themselves and their perspective, and then we'll get going. But please allow me to welcome to the stage David. We'll be using first names as well, so this is a family setting. David, CEO, Rwanda National Cybersecurity Authority. Senator Olivier, I will have to say Senator Olivier Cadic, but we'll move also. From France, Senator, you're over here. Tariq, Chief Data Scientist, Wellcome Trust. Non, je crois. C'est bon. Annick, Director, Government Affairs, Africa Oracle. Okay, we're good. And then Lassina, DG, CEO, Smart Africa. Okay, thank you so much. We will do women first, because I have the mic, so I can do that. I think what we'll do is start off with just a short intro so that the people who are listening to this conversation know. I know we've shared profiles, but just especially so people understand the background and the expertise that you bring to this conversation, and then we'll have a quick fire round. So let's go around this way.
Thank you, Isabel. And I'm really glad to be part of this, the panel conversation. So like you said, my name is Annick Sako. I am Director of Government Affairs for Oracle, covering Africa. And Oracle is a technology company, and we are active in proposing cloud solution as well as application and technology solution. And we are also in education and e-learning. And in my capacity, I work a lot with governments to partner with them in their digital transformation.
Thank you so much, Annick. Lassina?
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Lassina Kone. I am the CEO of Smart Africa, a Pan-African organization based in Kigali, with over 40 countries, covering about 1.2 billion populations, with only one vision to transform Africa into a single digital market by 2030.
Thank you so much, Annick. Tariq?
Thanks, Isabel. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Tariq Kokar. I'm the Chief Data Scientist of the Wellcome Trust, which is a philanthropic foundation based in the UK. And we spend around $2 billion a year funding science and health research internationally in 4 areas. The first is basic scientific research, everything from genomics to cell biology and population health, and then 3 focus areas of infectious disease, mental health, and the health impacts of climate change. So you'll hear lots of examples of science and health from me as we continue this discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. David?
Thank you. My name is David Kanamugire. I'm the CEO of Rwanda's National Cybersecurity Authority. The Rwanda National Cybersecurity Authority is an active player within the data and AI ecosystem. We also oversee the data protection and privacy. So it's a great pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel.
Thank you so much. And before Honorable Olivier starts, we do have simultaneous translation, so you can gossip with us in your language. Because we've offered him both to go between English and French. So please ask if you need translation. Monsieur.
Thank you. I will speak later in English as to introduce myself. I'm senator, so I represent the French living abroad. So I have the word for constituency. I'm vice president of the Committee for Foreign Affairs, Defense, and Forced Arm. I'm president of the Special Committee for Cybersecurity, and I'm in charge of cybersecurity for 8 years now in Senate.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I know there's a lot of conversation this morning that I'd like us to reflect on as well in our secret meeting. and then go into some questions. One of the things that has come up a lot from the president's remarks is AI infrastructure. So, rapid fire, if you had to prioritize one investment, what would it be and why? And we can start again. I know you all have different angles, so I'm interested to see what you would prioritize.
Thank you, Isabel. I think when we talk about AI, we'll talk about data, we talk about compute. Data is available all across Africa, government, private sector, and the tools are there. What we would lack maybe in Africa is a cloud computing environment, the cloud infrastructure, because AI needs cloud. And on the other hand, cloud also needs AI. Why do I say that? Because AI needs the power of the cloud to be able to run all the testing and all the training using very powerful processor, the GPU that we talked about this morning. And this needs to be really developed and deployed in cloud.
Yeah.
And we need also to have AI in the cloud infrastructure because AI helps the cloud hyperscaler to provide services in security because it's help anticipate and proactively secure the data and avoid any challenges. And it also is a way to provide cloud service at an affordable cost because it helps scale up and help the different users have it. So in my view, it will be more of what we discussed actually this morning, having more data centers in Africa and giving the opportunity to all these users, be it private sector or government, to have the data center where they can now run the AI solution that they either develop or use. But it's also very important because for once, Africa had the opportunity to now be creative and lead the conversation rather than be a consumer. And this will be one of the components that will help us really take ownership of the AI and really produce something that will be to resolve issues in the continent, the African continent, and for the use of Africans.
Thank you so much, Anik. Lassina.
Thank
Agree
you.
or disagree or have a different opinion?
My answer will actually surprise you. When you talk about investments, before we talk about investment, I will say that not everything boils down to investments. It's like investment or funding or financing is like the rain. For it to rain, you need certain conditions of the cloud. Those clouds are the regulatory environment. So
Interesting.
over 50 countries, you're talking 50 data centers, AI data centers? That's the problem. No. It basically means we need one or two or three, maybe one per region. I'm okay for the investment, but before the investment, we need data governance, regulatory harmonization first. And when we talk about that, when America talks about a frontier model, they talk about their private sector. When Asia talk about their frontier model, they talk about private sector. When we talk, we should be talking about our private sector for the investment. But they will never invest until we have those policy harmonized first. That's what I have to say.
So when we hear this number around 700 data centers required, you're not buying into that?
Not necessarily, because it's been proven to us for the past 3 months, you don't need to boil an ocean to have a cup of tea. It's not only about power.
Yeah.
We're not looking for a superpower AI. We're looking for a useful AI. You heard that from the president of Togo today.
Absolutely.
So to do that, we need to do our homework. Criteria for having those data centers, AI data centers, is one thing. But for us to collaborate to use those data, it will require not transfer of technology, transfer of trust. The deficit of trust on our continent is the foundation for everything.
That's a very touchy one. We're going to come back to that. That's a hard one.
Well, I'm
Sorry.
afraid I'm not going to live up to your expectation of being provocative, because I fully agree with both of those. comments. But I mean, I'll cheat slightly. If you ask a chief data scientist what's the most important investment, of course I'm going to say data.
Yeah.
But I'll give you, and maybe in the spirit of post-lunch activation, I'll do a sort of show of hands exercise. But who here has come across the tool AlphaFold?
AlphaFold?
AlphaFold. It's usually a way of calling out the scientists in the room. But AlphaFold was released a few years ago by a Google research group called DeepMind. And it's an AI model that can determine the structure of a protein. If you give it the sequence of the protein, it will tell you what the 3D shape of the protein is. And that's very useful because if you know the 3D shape, you can tell what the molecule will do or understand its properties. So very, very powerful tool. But the way I try and explain how powerful it is, in the past, it would take basically one PhD, so about 5 years, to determine the structure of one protein. When AlphaFold was released, the computer had determined the structures of 2 million proteins. So this is a massive contribution to the field of science. But what made it possible? Huge investments in data. So for the last 20 years, the Protein Data Bank, which has all the kind of training data for this model, had been invested in by public funders, by private funders as well. And while there's huge applications of AI in Africa already, so many of the kind of new frontiers do require, not necessarily as big as that, they require targeted investments in data in the specific domains that we want to apply AI to. So I'll give you my lazy answer there, data.
So data, invest in data. You're the data man, David.
So I'm trying to see how I'm allowed to differ from the previous speakers. It's kind of difficult to ask a hungry person which choice of food he's going to have. First tell me there is food, and then we can go to choices. So I think in this type of what comes first when a lot of things are not in place is a very hard question.
Yeah.
And it is very hard because if everything is in place, you can say data. And I totally agree with you. If everything is in place, if you have the scientists who are going to make use of it, if you have the internet connectivity that is going to transfer this data, if you have the computing, if you have the cloud, if it resides in Africa, if people know how to use it, if people can know the different classes of data, which is important, which is sensitive, which is not, then I would say data.
Yeah.
But I don't have that luxury. So I will ask, can I say everything?
That's also an answer.
And everything, I mean a data ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the data ecosystem will have the hard infrastructure, will have the regulatory and governance structures, it will have skill sets, and I will say, maybe can we do so much so fast that people think we have only one priority?
Wow.
Interesting. Senator Olivier.
OK. C'est difficile pour moi de venir dire ici ce qu'il faudrait faire pour l'Afrique. Et j'espère que vous me pardonnerez d'avoir l'humilité de ne pas vous le dire, parce que nous-mêmes, nous sommes confrontés aux mêmes défis que vous en Europe, et il n'est pas si facile que ça d'apporter les bonnes réponses pour nous-mêmes. Donc, voilà, je ne me sens pas... J'écoute depuis ce matin donc, tout ce qui s'est dit, et je trouve que votre réponse a beaucoup de pertinence et de sens, puisque, effectivement, tout le monde a raison dans ce qu'il dit. Et donc, moi, c'est ce qui m'a marqué de cet échange. Mais ce que j'avais un peu préparé, non seulement pour dire que je remerciais la ministre Pauline Gabiré qui était à Paris au sommet sur l'IA et qui m'avait fait l'aimable invitation de venir ici. Et je peux juste commencer par vous dire, parce que je suis là depuis ce matin, comment je suis impressionné par le niveau, l'excellence. Enfin, on reconnaît le leadership, la vision du président Kagame ici, dans tout ça, dans ce qu'on voit. Ce que nous avons essayé de faire, et c'est un peu ça que je veux partager avec vous ici, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on a essayé de faire en Europe et pourquoi l'Europe l'Union européenne a été les premiers à faire l'IA Act. Pourquoi? Parce que on a vu comment la désinformation pouvait impacter très fort sur les opinions, et on a été effrayé par le potentiel de l'IA. Et donc, vous dire que ce qu'on a, nous, souhaité, c'est, en France, avec le sommet, c'était de renforcer la coopération internationale pour une intelligence artificielle éthique et durable, en soulignant l'importance d'une gouvernance efficace et inclusive. Donc c'est pour ça que je me retrouve dans ce que vous dites. Et moi, je me suis réjoui depuis ce matin d'entendre tant de gens ici qui partagent la même préoccupation de promouvoir une vision d'une intelligence artificielle au service de l'intérêt général. Et c'est justement ce que veut faire cet Artificial Intelligence Act, c'est d'encadrer l'utilisation et le développement de l'IA dans l'Union européenne. Et j'insiste parce que je sais que c'est critiqué par certains, et je veux vous expliquer pourquoi. Donc, l'Union européenne souhaite garantir la sécurité et les droits fondamentaux face aux risques liés à l'intelligence artificielle. Nous voulons encourager l'innovation en limitant les abus et établir des règles claires pour les développeurs et les utilisateurs de l'intelligence artificielle. L'IA Act classe les systèmes d'intelligence artificielle en 4 niveaux de risque. Le premier, c'est le risque minimal. C'est les filtres photos que vous avez sur vos téléphones. Il n'y a pas de régulation spécifique pour ça. Le niveau 2, c'est le risque limité. C'est l'IA générative, comme ChatGPT. Donc là, ils sont soumis à des obligations d'information. Le troisième, c'est le risque élevé. Comment on utilise l'IA dans la justice, dans la santé, pour administrer les infrastructures critiques. Et le quatrième risque, c'est le risque inacceptable pour les Européens. C'est le risque interdit. C'est l'intelligence artificielle qui est utilisée actuellement par un parti mondialement connu que je ne citerai pas.
Ouais.
Yeah.
Voilà, qui manipule les comportements, qui permet la reconnaissance faciale en temps réel, sans contrôle, et qui permet la notation sociale. Ça, c'est strictement interdit dans l'Union européenne. Donc faire ça, c'est strictement interdit. Et vous comprenez pourquoi là, les Européens s'opposent à une intelligence artificielle non contrôlée. Voilà, c'est le simple fait de vouloir vivre libre et indépendant, et je crois qu'on se rejoindra.
Thank you, Senator Olivier. And I think I'm going to, we've kind of segued into data governance, and Lassina, I know Smart Africa, and with yourself at the helm, have really been driving this. And so I want us to move into data governance and really looking at the European structure with these risks. They managed to come together. I know completely different socioeconomic backgrounds, challenges, risks, and even opportunities. But with the 4-tiered risks, et cetera. How, when you talked very, importantly about governance and harmonization, how do you see that working? We've got so many things that Smart Africa has obviously spearheaded. We have our strategy. How do we do it? There's the momentum, but how?
Yeah, how do we do it?
How do we do it?
Policy harmonization. You see, you need to remember something. We all need to remember that. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. Mm-hmm. Each size should fit together. There are common denominators which are the foundational for data privacy. Mm-hmm. And I will mention it here. We call it PPPP. PPPP, 4 Ps.
4 Ps.
Public, private, people, partnership. We forget about people. That is the human-centric one. How do we do it? Today, when we talk about AI, when we talk general about data governance, there's about 37 countries in Africa with the data governance law. Mm-hmm. Of course, derived from Malabo conventions. What we do, we look at the common denominator which are essential for human-centric approach. one. When we look at the common denominator, we also have to insist that how do you make those policy attractive to investor? Trust me, it's not the government driving the economy, it's the private sector. It's the number 4th manifesto of Smart Africa, private sector first. So once you do that, and we have a Council of African Regulator, we sit with them every 3 months, 4 months, to discuss these are the policy clauses, different country, Kenya different from Ghana, Ghana different from South Africa. Some of these clauses are nationally significant. They are not continentally significant. That's how the GDPR was actually created. You don't have to agree on everything. That's what I said. One size does not fit all, but each size should fit together. Once you do that, it means that you're basically preserving the national sovereignty. But no one argued about the continental sovereignty. I heard this morning about the AI sovereignty to be a myth. You know what? Let me be a little bit bold here. What is the difference between the AI models and the WhatsApp or all this OTT? It's the same. But you know what's the danger? When you're using a social media, you're just communicating. All what the server is doing is just profiling you and targeting you for specific things. But when you're using an application of AI, they're not profiling you. They know what the system is telling you. Now they know how you think. So if you allow these thinkings to be outside the continent, you are straight going into eternal, infinite colonization of digital. That's the reason AI should be an equalizer for social inclusion, not a divider of the best from the rest. Do I make myself understood?
That's very clear.
Very important.
Yeah.
That's why when we are looking at that, in Africa particularly, for your question, in policy harmonization, it is a must. No one country today can do AI alone. Let's look at the pillars. Computing power. Can we afford how many data centers? Today, Africa controls only 1% of the entire data center market in the world, which is equal to the number of data centers in Switzerland. 2% of the AI contents are only African. We have 70% of our young people who are less than 30 years old. So you can see the cocktail, how the cocktail is going on. So if we want really an AI which is useful, then we must be integrated. And it starts, first of all, with the regulatory environment. I totally agree with the European approach, but be mindful. The regulation should be an enabler for innovation. It means regulation for development. Simple example, we are all used in Africa for regulation as a sanctionings, controlling quality of data, quality of the no. Then we were passive. In a way that 25 years ago, the ministry has to ask the MNO how many subscribers you have. No, it has to be a data-driven, and intentionally, government should be taking measures to move forward in terms of emerging technology. That's what we call now sandboxing. So the regulatory environment, yes, but it should be an enabler for innovation. Because you know what? For a sustainable development in digital economy, it requires an adaptive environment. But if the regulation is not adaptive, we go into Stone Age, period. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anik and Tariq, I want to come to you from your different perspectives. I mean, there's a big role for the private sector to play. And Tariq, there's also a huge role for research. I know you're very focused on science, but research generally. One of the other numbers I've been hearing through the meetings is Africans contribute less than 1% to research in this sector, which doesn't make any sense. So based on what Lassina has said, and also Senator Olivier, what is the role of the private sector, and how can you work, you being representing the private sector, not just Oracle, but work with government to really build this ecosystem that we need?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this has been touched upon during the conversation. It's not for government to invest so much in these technology. It's more private sector to partner with government and create this ecosystem that will allow the rise of AI technologies. But I fully agree with Lassina, who is not being disruptive at all. we can't imagine having those 700 data centers.
Yeah.
We need to have a way to share the resources for the benefit of every citizen of the continent, not of the countries. And this goes through harmonization, yes, partnership. We can start at regional levels. We have so many communities, economic communities, and where if the environment is there, this is a responsibility of the government to have the incentive to attract investment. And this can also be solidified by the clear rules about data transfer, because if we don't have those cross-border data center data transfer available, it doesn't make sense to have one data center in one place and rely on it to serve many countries in the region. So private sector is here to help provide the technology, the infrastructure, the services. And when we talk about sovereignty, for example, I'll give the example of Oracle that I know. We have the tools, the AI tools, that are available to the researcher, the student, the startup, and then they can use whichever partner that we have to use their LLM and train their data. But this needs resources. And then the private sector comes across, but we cannot help those researchers, those startups, etc. If they have the tools, but they don't have the data available to run the tools.
Yeah.
And you're not going to rely on the data for one country only. If you want your solution to be not only serving your country, but serving the continent and the world, it has to be trained.
Yeah.
But this can only be after the various governments come to a harmonization, have clear laws about how the data sets will cross. It's legitimate for a government to want to keep the sensible, strategic information within their borders. But then they can go one step further and agree on the classification and agree that some data sets can be shared, anonymized, etc. But give the fuel to all these companies to start running the thing. And this is how private sector will make the tools available, the infrastructure available, all the different technologies, and then government responsibility will be to put in place the right ecosystem, legal, regulatory, whatever, so that the company, the startup, and even themselves, government, can use that. And private sector also will bring technology within the country, but it's also our responsibility to train.
Yeah.
We can't just bring the new technology in the country and then expect that to be used fully to its capacity. So skilling is also important. And again, I'll talk about what I know. Having tools and platforms, e-learning platforms, to train the youth, but also to train the civil servant, because at some point in time, if government adopt AI, these civil servants will have to use it and will have to understand and know how to use it.
Yeah.
But we can come later to the way that
There's
AI
a lot,
can be
and this
used.
is what David said, everything, right? Because it's like, Lassina, I know you want to react to
No,
that.
what Anik was saying, my sister was saying, is so true. But we don't want to sound like we are protectionists when we say private sector. Just mean Afro private sector. You can look at the 7 magnificent that we used to be called GAFAM before. When you're looking at me, are you looking at me as a market or are you looking at me as a partner? There's a big difference. You're looking at me as a market to squeeze my data, or you're looking for a partner to stay. You're here to stay. It's very different.
Yeah.
They have the capability of flipping Africa around in the next 5 years for us to have our sovereign AI. Why they're not doing it? Because they're looking at us as a market.
Yeah.
Then in this case, if every nation, we went to the Paris summit, European talk about a private sector Mistral, American Frontier talked about, the Frontier American, they talk about private sector's name. I don't want to say many, Llama, all of this. Then we should be ushering our Afro champion and international partner who trusted us from the get-go by staying in Africa, looking after our sovereignty to have our AI, which actually respect our values and languages.
Yeah. So good. I always feel like there's a tension because there's this need to come collectively to ensure global competitiveness, what you're saying, shared resources, but then you talked about the trust, right? Just this inability to trust and want to keep data to yourself. So there's a tension that's happening on the continent, right? It's like we've got to work together, but then we also want to be on our own in our individual countries. And I'll let David reflect on that. Let's just get some, from the research side, what is the role, or what do you think the role should be? I mean, looking from the UK.
Sure. I mean, it's a big question, but I'll pick a couple of narrow lanes. I mean, your mention of the 1%, there are a few other 1% that have been on my mind over the last week. So I think even earlier this morning, people remarked on the demography of Africa. A fifth of the world is African. It will be a quarter of the world in 2050. But given that 20% of the world approximately is African right now, African language data represents less than 1% of the data used to train the big kind of commercial models at the moment. And when you look at genomic research, less than 1% of data from African populations is going into genomic research. Now, hopefully it's obvious why that is not a good situation.
Yeah.
If you want treatments, therapies, and health insights that are most relevant to African populations, you need that genomic data diversity, if you like, in the scientific field to make it work. And equally, we've heard today about the importance of language representation. So just from a context point of view, that's what it looks like from my vantage point. I'll make two other points. The first is just on infrastructure and how that term is used. So everyone thinks of infrastructure as roads, water, electricity, and we're starting to talk about digital infrastructure, but there hasn't been, I don't think, very clear thinking in many governments around how do we really treat this stuff as infrastructure. Is like the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Planning involved in thinking about this as a top sort of strategic agenda for the country? Is it going to be long-term? Is it going to be cross-cutting? Is it seen as central to the economic future of a country? That's what it means to have infrastructure thinking for this sort of work. And maybe someone who's closer to this than I am can comment on that. But I think that's an important sort of change for, not just governments in Africa, even governments in the UK. I think only in the last few years they've started to think about this way. The last thing I'll say on research, we at Wellcome obviously fund a lot of research centers and institutes across low and middle income countries. The one closest to here is KEMRI in Kenya, and that's a collaboration with the Kenyan government. So I think one way that research funders can work with government is in collaboration. We can jointly support initiatives like that where really powerful, locally relevant health research using AI is coming out. But what I'd say is, and this is echoing Strive's point from earlier, you need a pipeline of talent. It's not just about funding PhDs and these researchers who are using machine learning models to predict maternal health outcomes. You need kids who are enthusiastic and capable in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and are the pipeline into this sort of career, into commercial careers, et cetera. So that's a little bit of the partnership research.
And so when you're funding governments, are you also funding the research and the researchers, the PhDs, partnering with universities, and building up capacity at the universities?
Yeah, that's right. So we have programs which folks can look up. They're all publicly documented. Initiatives like the African Bioinformatics Institute, and there's a program called Data Science Without Borders. These are all squarely focused on building capacity and capability across the continent around, in the first case, bioinformatics capability in particular, and for the Data Science Without Borders program around making sure there are actually good cross-border collaborations around health data research. I mean, even in, the United Kingdom is comprised of Scotland, England, Wales, and and even within these countries, we have a hard time doing sort of data sharing. So I wouldn't say anybody really has it figured out, but it's great to see some bright spots here in Africa.
Thank you so much. David, there's been a lot of talk. So, I mean, Tarek talked about, how our government's thinking around infrastructure and prioritizing that, and we've had the discussion around data and the infrastructure. What's the Rwandan perspective, and what can you share with, I mean, the data protection law was now 2 years in?
Yes.
What can you share from the Rwandan perspective?
Yeah, thank you. So I think first I'll comment, when we were there, briefing, he said he could be provocative, and I want to say he did that so well with very exciting, insightful answers that makes us think whether, so thank you for that. And if I could touch about one thing before I go to Rwandan specific case, about this subject of data sovereignty, which you mentioned tends to have a bad name.
Yes.
Or something, if you look on one side, countries say we should contain everything within our borders. Other group of thoughts say it should be open for access. And then one has to ask, if I use an analogy, you can't say, let's remove traffic rules and then not also have traffic jam. You can't have both, right? If you remove traffic cops and you remove traffic rules and regulations and you stop asking people to have driver's license, do not complain if you are stuck in a traffic jam and you have accidents. So there are things you can't have both. And that's because of the nature of data. So data itself is not good or bad. The governance that Rasina talked about determines its utility and usefulness. So it really has to be those set of effective rules and regulations that make sure you don't have to choose between sovereignty on one side or access on the other. No, you don't have to. It's not one or the other. There are two different sides of the same coin. You can't not have both. You tilt one side, you have confusion, you lose all the benefit AI produces. If you control too much, you stifle innovation. You don't want both. So that's why I very much wanted to say that was a good provocation. It kept us thinking. Now, what we have seen in Rwanda, and now our data protection and privacy law has been enforced for slightly over 2 years. And we have learned some lessons. And our approach has been, we adopted 3 principles. First, we adopted a tiered data classification. By what that means, there is not all data is the same. Not all of it has the same level of sensitivity. Not all of it is prone to the same risks. If you're dealing with medical data, nobody wants someone's personal healthcare records out in the open. So clearly, you don't have a valid reason to say, let's make that open data. So conventionally, we say, if you want access to healthcare records, let's agree that you will have specific safeguards. Then you can do that. If you want financial information that is published by the central bank, they've put in place a regulatory sandbox. It's there, it's open access if you're registered within the financial sector, so you can go and have it. But there will be other data sets, like I mentioned, the healthcare, you don't need it. So by having a tiered approach to data classification, you avoid this balancing. You don't want it to be too tight, but we say, let's define the data you have, let's establish a valid need, and let those who have a valid and legitimate reasons access it. So by that adoption alone, you don't spend a lot of time saying you can or cannot. So that's one way we achieve the balance. Another thing which we have done in Rwanda is adopting regulatory flexibility as a principle. By flexibility, we mean we have rules, we have regulations, we have everything, but we also have other considerations. Is it economically beneficial? Does it serve the community? Does it give overall benefit? And does the law allow us flexibility to change? So luckily, the Rwandan law is flexible. So if there is a need and we have done data protection impact assessment, and we say the risk is minimal. We say go for it. And from that, we have attracted companies that find Rwanda a good test ground for some of this. You've heard of Zipline, you've heard of within our data protection agency. Last year, we had about 100 plus companies who would say, I'm starting a fintech company. I don't know, have everything in order, but I have a great product. You say, come here, register with us. You don't have to fill 100 forms. Just let us know how it's going. And we appoint a point of contact. Please, let us know. Keep in touch. Right here, give you a number. We'll let you go. We have assessed, if you are a startup, you really don't have a product that is going to cause any big impact anyway. So why would we be so obsessed with something risk-averse, something that is not even there? When you grow to a level where you think the risk is big, you already have registered with us. So we're moving from now this option of saying, let's not go into strict regulation or open access. Let's go into something we call co-creation.
Co-creation.
Can we do it together?
Yep.
As you do your thing, as we do our regulation, can we do it together? So another thing that we have done, the third thing in Rwanda, is really prioritizing safe innovation. And by safe innovation, we say, listen, you have a burning idea as a startup to go and do these great things. I have interests to make sure everything is done in a safe and secure manner. Where do we meet? So I will give you an example of one company, that a startup in the healthcare industry. And I think I saw some guys called eFish. What did they say? They said, tell us about your regulations. So we design our product with compliance in mind. So they call that compliance by design. So instead of us giving them hundreds of forms, we just review their implementation architecture. So it's already compliant before they even have a product that is running. So when the Ministry of Health goes there, they say, oh, how did you guys do it? But it's because they decided to learn ahead of time, adopt regulation, and design a product that is already compliant before us coming to audit compliance. So by having tiered data classification, by having flexible regulation, by prioritizing safe innovation, everybody can win. And we don't see, in the 2 years that we have been implementing this law, we've not penalized a single person. But everybody calls, say, we hear this law, it's stopping us from doing this. We say, actually, you must have heard from the wrong person. If you have heard from us, this law ensures you drive safely on the data road.
Yeah.
If you are willing to follow unless if you say, you know what, by nature I want to break the rules, they say, oh, you went to the wrong office. But if you say, I want you to help me innovate safely, because if you're going to go into healthcare, you don't want to come with products that don't meet these guidelines.
Yeah.
So if you say, oh, no, it's too much, but I want to be in healthcare, you say, you want to try something else? Healthcare has these regulations. Fintech has these regulations. So I think we have learned it can't be between open access or data sovereignty or protection.
Yeah.
They can all exist if the governance structure is right.
It's very good. And this is why a lot of people have said, even from the morning discussions, that Rwanda is really leading in helping us think how to balance the two, innovation and regulation. Thank you so much for those. Honorable Senator Olivier, what the EU AI Act, we've just talked about what Rwanda is doing in terms of innovation and supporting that community, which is a very important community for us in Africa, but also in France. How are you empowering the startup community in France/Europe under the EU AI Act?
Ok, vraiment, le débat est très intéressant parce que, en fait, je vois toutes les similitudes, entre ce que vous percevez comme importance, vraiment comme défi, et ce que nous vivons. C'est c'est la même chose. On a besoin de s'approprier les choses. On a besoin de s'approprier l'AI. On veut pouvoir, on veut que ça soit conforme à ce qu'on pense, à notre culture. On ne veut pas que ça soit imposé par quelqu'un d'autre. Que ce soit une très grande entreprise qui a la mainmise au niveau de l'informatique ou un État étranger. On veut cette autonomie, tous. Et donc, c'est très intéressant de voir justement comment s'organiser. On voit bien l'approche, je dirais, intelligente, pragmatique, là, dont vous avez décrit. Mais d'un autre côté, on voit aussi la limite si on fait ça à chaque fois au niveau d'un État. Et nous, c'est notre difficulté dans l'Union européenne. Et c'est pour ça que le RGPD, peut-être vous ne le savez pas, c'est une idée française au départ, qui a essaimé dans l'Union européenne. Parce qu'on voulait vraiment que les données de nos compatriotes soient souveraines, soient chez nous. Et donc, on a voulu ça, ce règlement. Donc, on a mis au niveau européen. Et fantastique, ça a même été repris ailleurs. Donc, ça veut bien dire que cette sensation de data privacy, c'est quelque chose que l'on partage. Voilà. Donc, après, c'est comment on fait les choses. Vous avez dit vraiment des choses très, très intéressantes. Et c'est effectivement dans l'AI Act, il y a effectivement la question de régulation, mais il y a aussi la question de donner de la force. Il faut que les jeunes s'approprient l'AI, donc il faut les encourager. Avec l'éducation, les carrières, ça a été dit ce matin, les préparer pour ces futurs jobs, puisque je crois que c'est le président Kagame qui a parlé vraiment de ça. Donc ça, c'est important et c'est dans les Act. Il est prévu un grand programme d'investissement pour l'éducation dans les AR avec donc ça s'appelle Digital Europe Programme. Ça donne donc bien évidemment des subventions, des bourses pour les étudiants, des formations. Donc tout ça, c'est pour les jeunes, c'est pour donner cette capacité à notre jeunesse à rentrer et à utiliser l'IA. Mais, et vous l'avez très bien dit, puisqu'à un moment vous avez parlé de sandbox, et il faut effectivement, vous l'avez dit, créer des conditions favorables pour développer des startups. Sinon, ce sera les majors, et donc on a besoin. Et une start-up qui va réussir ici sur son marché ne sera pas la même que celle qui va être en Europe. Et j'ai beaucoup aimé ce que vous avez dit sur est-ce qu'on nous voit comme un partenaire ou un client.
Ouais.
Ah oui, exactement.
Et c'est ça, c'est vraiment ça. On se pose tous cette question. C'est pour ça que moi je suis passionné par ce que j'entends. Et donc l'AI Act, donc c'est justement c'est donner un environnement, créer un environnement favorable où donc les startups vont pouvoir tester leurs applications dans un environnement contrôlé, voilà, sur lesquels ils auront la main. Il faut donner aussi un financial support, donc des fonds. Il faut que les startups puissent lever de l'argent pour pouvoir développer leur programme. Donc elles ont besoin de fonds. Donc là aussi, il faut qu'on soit positionné. Et évidemment, nous, ce qu'on souhaite, c'est d'éviter que des grands monopoles, je suis désolé de le dire, captent l'AI. Parce que sinon, on perd notre liberté. C'est encore une fois, je le ramène toujours à ça, mais c'est ce qu'on ressent vraiment au niveau du consommateur. Moi, je suis un élu, ça veut dire que j'ai des électeurs qui m'élisent, donc je porte ce qu'ils ressentent. Ensuite, c'est vrai il faut donner aux startups de la santé, les fintech, les legal tech, il faut leur donner un environnement protégés pour qu'ils puissent se développer. Sinon, ils n'auront aucune chance de réussir. Et enfin, la troisième chose, c'est qu'effectivement, les données doivent être compliant avec le RGPD. C'est fondamental, ça a été dit, parce que sinon, j'ai adoré, sinon, on va avoir des embouteillages quelque part, ou alors ça va être l'anarchie. On va voir les gens rouler partout, et donc les clients vont se plaindre. Nos électeurs vont se plaindre, ça ne va pas leur convenir, leurs données seront volées, seront aspirées par d'autres qui se serviront de nos données, les vôtres, les nôtres, pour pouvoir, eux, développer des modèles qui vont nous surpasser. Ouais. Et donc c'est pour ça qu'on a besoin de réfléchir ensemble sur ces choses-là. Donc voilà, il y a une initiative comme AI for EU et Data Spaces qui ont pour but de créer un AI partagé et des données, des infrastructures de données qui réduisent la dépendance au big tech. Voilà, donc vous avez compris ce qu'on cherche à faire, et c'est vrai que la volonté de l'Europe, c'est de, puisqu'on est un marché et qu'on est un grand client, on est vu comme un grand client par certains, c'est de justement d'être plutôt un leader au niveau de l'AI éthique. Voilà, donc c'est ce qui est, et je pense que c'est ce que, pour ceux qui sont allés à Paris, l'ont ressenti, et d'abord vous avez pu voir que ce n'était pas la France seule qui présidait, c'était co-présidé avec l'Inde, donc pour bien montrer que ce n'est pas quelque chose qui peut se décider, vous l'avez dit, par un pays où il faut que ce soit partagé. Voilà, la réflexion, voilà, elle est partagée.
Thank you so much. I think there's so much that we can learn from the EU perspective and also what we've shared here. We're going to come to an end, and I do have one rapid fire question for all. But before we get there, I know we've talked a lot about data, but I want to talk a little bit about some of this monetization and some of what's happening. And I'll direct these to Lassina and to Tariq. There's a lot of data, right? So we've gone back to both of you with the data question. There's a lot of data that we need to collate, quite frankly, and structure. And I'm thinking about things like, when we look at climate change, which is a big, big issue for us on the continent, and we're getting this data from farmers, and it's being fed up the system, right? But the farmer is not getting paid. So when we are in this season of having to rapidly pull together, structure, digitize our data, how do you make sure that that stays fair? And that it's not just the monetization, but it's, that it's kept fair for everybody along the chain, but it's secure as well. And maybe, David, you could speak a little bit about security as well. If we can just have some brief reflections on that, and then we'll move to the rapid fire. So, Tariq or Lassina, you want to go?
We call it at Smart Africa privacy by design, the 4 Ps. And it's not something new. It's been done by Estonia. It's been done by Luxembourg. If you access my data as a public service, I know about it. I give authorization. How many countries are actually implementing that? So the problem occurs, how to build trust. Trust is a two-way street. I trust you, and you trust me. So if my data is being utilized, and I don't really know about it, and there is no benefit, what's the point? What we experience in living today with the 7 magnificent, or the GAFAM, is only the tip of the iceberg. It's only B to C, business to consumer. But we have G to C, government to customer, G to B, government to business. We have also P to P. So all this hype, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The real nuclei is when the government start putting a citizen at the center of the social economic development, where the citizen has the phone bill, energy bill, education, car loans, mortgages, and all of that. That's the real data. If it's designed with the mindset of privacy by design, PPP, public-private people partnership, that's when when the consumer will start benefiting. And it's not something new. Ghana Board of Cocoa, they made the data available publicly, which benefited 30% of the crop and 40% of the farmers, of the revenue. Kenya, even Rwanda here, they put law out to make all the data available for the startup. They're benefiting. Kenya, they made all the multinational private company who were coming to operate in Kenya, make your data available for the startup to build model. It is not something new, but it has to be deliberate. We are living in the era, it has to be deliberate. The future, you don't wait for it, you make it.
Thank you so much. Tariq, your perspectives on this?
I mean, just building on the point around citizens, one thing that we've found in the UK when it comes to the question of monetization and the involvement, particularly of the private sector when it comes to health and medical records, is you have to involve citizens really closely. And For a long time, there was this, I think, naive view that this subject is too complicated to get the public involved with, and we have to leave it to experts in government. That's absolute nonsense. So, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we commissioned a piece of work that resulted in a report called the Foundations of Fairness. And this team did a series of citizens juries where you get members of the general public to ask what would you be comfortable, what sort of setup would make you comfortable when it comes to health data being used by industry. And by and large, people are comfortable with that as long as, one, there's a lot of transparency around who is doing what with my data and why, but crucially that there is a fair exchange of value. People understand, people don't begrudge a company making money here, but they also want to make sure that actually if you're using my test data or my health data, I want to make sure that the UK public is benefiting from that innovation as well. So that's one idea, like involve citizens and make sure that we're catering to people's choices and values around a fair exchange of value. And the second thing is, and we talked a bit about it earlier, is and I'll point at the Wellcome Trust and other philanthropic funders in this space for a moment, but a lot of research funding sort of requires that everything is open when you fund it. And for a whole category of data and research, that sort of makes sense. But for a whole category of research and data, I don't think that makes sense anymore. I think the kind of conditions we apply to the money that we give out is sort of exacerbating problems like this. So I think there needs to be a bit of pushback against sort of organizations who are saying, look, open is best. Actually, open may not be best. You need to think creatively about business models that work in the interests of communities and the folks where the data is coming from, and provide a fair exchange of value to the users and the people who are going to build applications on top of it.
So we need to be a little bit more careful about how we hold these funders and investors accountable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. David, so how are we protecting? We have the largest data sets, even if they're unstructured at the moment. How are we protecting all of this data?
Yeah, thank you. So I think when you say we, do you mean Africans?
Africans.
Okay. maybe we need to
We're no longer
clarify.
doing sovereignty in one country. It's all Africa.
This is possibly not an interesting statistic, but more than 80% of Africa's data resides outside Africa.
Oh, yes.
So when I asked the who, that's what I meant. So, and because of that, it's because we woke up too late before this discussion about data, about AI, about everything. So we came to the table a bit too late, but it was never late. We can catch up, but we have to be cognizant of that fact that a lot of African data does not reside in Africa. So when we talk about cross-border data flow, I think we also need to say cross-ocean data backflow or inflow. So that doesn't make a security part of it any easier. It makes it even more complicated. Where data resides in various jurisdictions, they have different sets of laws. So each country have different data protection regulations. In Africa, Lassina said we have 38.
Yeah. So far.
Yeah. So
These
far.
are not simple. Every country has its own set of regulations, so we have a fragmented, so that makes security not easy. Second, where this data physically resides in the data centers, in the storage servers, probably you might not even be allowed within 2 kilometers of it, leave alone securing it. So it's not a lost case, however. We can start from where we are, have governance structures in place, be realistic of the current reality, be under no false impression that we have everything under control, but say we will move right forward, move fast, put the right things in place, and let the private sector drive. To a large extent possible, they will do it right. There is an incentive for businesses to cooperate because they share a common thing. So within the element of security, the whole business of AI, if you remove security, its value becomes zero.
Yeah.
Like zero.
Of course.
You don't need AI if there is no security. Forget it. It's like say, oh, you know what? I talk about health and I prefer disease. No, you don't. So you don't want AI with no security.
Yeah.
Nobody wants it. And security is only driven by one currency, trust. And if you remove trust, it still comes to zero. So to build that trust, and I want to build on what my brother Lassina said, we need to be aware and alert of the realities we find ourselves in as Africans, get the governance structure right, build infrastructure that is safe and secure by design in place first. And if we really get it right, I liked very much what was said in the morning, an AI Council for Africa. Realize that you can't have AI security when you're talking about single country approach. It will not work. It's a collective effort. It's like saying you have a network of telecom that goes on within your boundaries. No, who are you speaking to there? You have to speak to your neighbors. You have to trade with your neighbors. So I think security will come. It will require special effort. And maybe one of the things that this AU Council should do is really realize that we need a set of urgent governance mechanisms that will put security at the same level of importance as infrastructure, at the same level of importance as governance.
Yeah.
So if you have that right, then it's navigable.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I could have had another 2 hours of conversation, but I will be kicked off this stage. So I'm going to ask for one word. What is the one thing that if we did from this gathering would instantly transform AI? And I'm going to start with you, Anik.
I think the foundation would be harmonization.
Harmonization. Okay, we need to harmonize.
For
I
it
think
to be
Bastina
able-
has converted you in this conversation.
I have not converted you.
Harmonization.
If I have one word to say, I think the takeaway from here, we Africans, we should not think we are in the catch-up game. We're not racing others. We should be focusing on defining finish line on our own term.
Fantastic. So stay in your lane.
Yeah, we're not racing anyone.
Yeah.
We have to define the finish line.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
We have to harness what we have, our youth, our competitive spirit, our problem-solving mindset that we have. We have to channel all of these into new way of leadership in this digital era. And that leadership, it should speak our language, it should preserve our value, it should create opportunity, not for few, for many.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway.
Thank you so much. Terry.
One word. I'd say momentum. And that's the thing I think you have to maintain when you're dealing with emerging technologies like this. The technology is moving so fast. If you stand still, it is just going to go right by you. Africa's home to some of the fastest animals on Earth. I think our communities can operate with pace and momentum to keep some of the brilliant progress that we're already seeing going and going further. Momentum.
Momentum. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's really resolving that this is once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yes.
And it's a strategic imperative. If you will have to live in this age, you have to live fast and get it right. So we can't go back. We are in the lane and we have to get it right.
Perfect. Thank you. Senator V.
Un mot,
Omo.
solidarité. On ne peut pas s'en sortir tout seul dans ce monde.
No.
Et donc, c'est pas quelqu'un first, c'est qu'on s'en sortira, on aura le monde qui sera acceptable par tout le monde quand on aura réfléchi ensemble et qu'on mettra tout le monde à bord, qu'on sera inclusif. Donc c'est ça, c'est solidarité. Voilà, on a tous les mêmes problèmes et il faut qu'on trouve les moyens ensemble de trouver les solutions parce que c'est pas possible qu'il y en ait un qui s'en sorte aux dépens des autres.
Non.
Parce qu'on sait très bien qu'il y aura des faiblesses et que la faiblesse viendra de celui qui est à la traîne. Donc il faut emmener tout le monde le plus vite possible, ensemble.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights. It's been a pleasure hosting you today.
Thank you.